Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Star Wars Lads. I'm Liam, and this week we finally got our first look at the Book of Boba Fett when the first trailer dropped. Even though we didn't get to see too much, it got me pretty hyped for the return of Star Wars live action storytelling. So this week, like I did with the Bad Batch Season 2, I'm going to be giving you my top 10 characters I think should be in the Book of Boba Fett. But before we get started, hit that like button down below, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you can stay up to date with all the latest from Star Wars Lads. We post videos 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, so you'll want to stick here for all the latest Star Wars content. We do videos of all types, so you can check that out on our channel. Then comment below and let me know what you thought of this video and which characters you think should be in the Book of Boba Fett as well, or which characters you'd like to see, see make return, anything. Let me know down below. We always respond to comments, so I'll get back to you. Now, on to the video. As always, before I get to the top 10, I'd like to mention some honorable mentions. First up, we have one of my all-time favorite characters, Malakili the Rancor Keeper. There's a rumor Boba Fett will be encountering Rancors in this series, so who better to take care of one than the legend himself? The Max Rebo Band. Of course, Boba has to listen to something while he sits on his throne, and there's no better way to spend an evening than with the smooth sounds of Max Rebo, Droopy McCool, Rappertoonie, and the crew. The Sarlacc Pit in the Great Pit of Carkoon. Obviously, this one comes from the theory that we are going to get a flashback to Boba Fett escaping the Sarlacc, so I feel pretty confident that this one will be in the show. Dirge, because he's just flat out awesome and I want to see him in live action. Diva Lompop, because she has connections to the High Republic era, and she and Boba Fett and Jabba have history. Okay, now on to the top 10. Number 10. Characters from The Mandalorian. This pick is fairly safe, but since the title of the video is the top 10 characters I think should be in the Book of Boba Fett, well, I think it should feature characters that would logically cross over from The Mandalorian. Obviously, the first that would come to mind would be Din Djarin himself. As a former bounty hunter and ally of Boba Fett, I would think the transition of Boba from The Mandalorian Season 2 finale to King Boba from the end credits of said finale, and the Book of Boba Fett would be clarified and most likely include a scene or two with Din. The other characters I could see popping up are Greef Karga, since he's the leader of the Bounty Hunter Guild on Navarro, Cobb Vanth, because he lives on Tatooine and was the one who originally found Boba's armor after he escaped from the Sarlacc Pit, and Bo-Katan, because they might go down the Mandalorian heritage route, but I think they're probably going to save that for the Mandalorian Season 3 and beyond in that show, so I would think this show would stick more to the crime route. If we get any of these characters, I would be happy, but they're all at the bottom of the list because I feel like I had to mention them more so than me being excited about their appearance because they seem fairly obvious. Number 9. More Legends canonizations. Disney and Lucasfilm haven't been too shy about bringing back and adapting beloved characters from Star Wars Legends, but they've very much so ignored the vast amount of characters from the Legends underworld. There are plenty of characters to choose from for canonization. We can look at both Dash Rendar or Prince Xizor from Shadows of the Empire. But personally, considering the time period both the Book of Boba Fett and the rest of the Mandalorian era shows take place in, which is 9 ABY in case you were wondering, or 5 years after Return of the Jedi. Anyway, this era takes place at the same time as the trilogy that basically started the EU in the early 90s, and that is the Thrawn trilogy, or the Heir to the Empire trilogy, based on what you want to call it. With many fans, including myself, theorizing we are going to get a variation of Heir to the Empire as the finale of the Mandalorian era, I would love to see Talon Karrde make his first appearance in canon in the Book of Boba Fett. If you don't know, Talon Karrde is a smuggler who plays a vital role throughout the events of the Thrawn trilogy, including leading a smuggler coalition against the Empire in The Last Command. He most likely wouldn't play the same or anywhere near as prominent a role as he did in the EU, but he could be a valuable entry point into the completely ignored world of smugglers within the Mandalorian timeline, which could later lead to him having some impact on the overall final battle against Grand Admiral Thrawn. Number 8. Han Solo, Chewbacca, and Lando Calrissian. Here we get into the hypothetical in a perfect world scenario, but realistically Han, Chewie, and Lando should come across Boba Fett at some point post Return of the Jedi to really wrap up that rivalry. If I'm being honest, there's very little shot at any of these characters actually showing up in the show because it would further open the what to do with the original trilogy characters on film during the 30-year gap between Return of the Jedi and Force Awakens can of worms that was set in motion last year with Luke appearing in The Mandalorian. Although if you would have asked me a year ago which of the starring original trilogy characters had the best shot at appearing in the Mandalorian timeline in live action, these three would have been the characters I would have given you, considering Chewbacca is a costume and Han and Lando have already been recast. That being said, I still don't think we're going to see them in the Book of Boba Fett this year, but if there is a season 2, my fingers would be crossed to see them then. Number 7, the original Empire Strikes Back bounty hunters. War of the Bounty Hunters brought our original bounty hunters from the Empire Strikes Back into prominence. As Charles Soule continues with his dive into the Star Wars underworld in Crimson Reign, and Ethan Sachs pushes forward with the Bounty Hunters mainline comic, it seems these characters are going to finally become more relevant in canon. What better way to continue this upward trend than by restoring them to live action and including them in what happens to be an absolute bounty hunter extravaganza like the Book of Boba Fett? We saw from the trailer how good modern Star Wars costume design is, and how the costume designers and creature effects artists can make Trandoshans look awesome with animatronic masks. So I'd love to see Boss get to shine like he did in the Clone Wars, but in live action this time. After seeing IG-11 in The Mandalorian Season 1, we know how awesome an IG Assassin Droid can look in live action, so imagine getting to see the IG Assassin Droid, IG-88, appear in the show. Then there's 4LOM and Zuckuss. I used to say 4LOM until the War of the Bounty Hunters corrected me with 4LOM. 4LOM and Zuckuss, both of whom were the biggest standouts to me in the War of the Bounty Hunters out of this group, would be awesome to see in live action once again. I'd really love to see their dynamic continue from the book. Overall, these are all pretty obvious picks, but I think we have a really strong shot at seeing them in this series. You may have noticed I didn't mention Dengar though, because... Number 6, Jaz Amari and her crew. Minor spoilers for the novel Star Wars Aftermath: Empire's End, but at the end of the novel, the bounty hunters Embo, Dengar, and Jita are granted full pardons by the New Republic on the petition of the book trilogy's most prominent bounty hunter, Jaz Amari, the niece of the Clone Wars bounty hunter Sugi. In exchange for their pardons, the 3 bounty hunters decided to join up with Jaz as part of her crew at the end of the novel. So if Dengar were to appear in the Book of Boba Fett, I would personally like him to be with the other 3 bounty hunters. If you've been following our channel for a while, you know I'm a big proponent of bringing book, comic, and video game characters into film and television in order to further heighten the importance of said book, comic, and game stories to the galaxy. As exciting as it would be for us book fans to see Jaz make her live-action debut, I think the vast majority of Star Wars fans would be even more hyped for the live-action debut of Embo. Next to Cad Bane, Embo was probably my favorite new bounty hunter introduced in the Clone Wars with his iconic straw hat Ronin design and bowcaster. If the Book of Boba Fett really wants to go all out with the bounty hunter madness, then they absolutely need to include these characters in the series at some point. Number 5, Baylert Valance. The Bounty Hunters comic has been consistently average since it began last year, but its lead character, Baylert Valance, is one of the reasons I keep reading as the series continues chugging along. For those of you who aren't familiar with the character, Valance originally entered canon as a member of the Imperial Academy and arrogant rival of Han Solo in the underrated miniseries Han Solo Imperial Cadet. He was a staunch Imperial patriot until his TIE fighter was shot down and he was left for dead by the Imperial Navy. Han chose to disobey orders and rescue Valance, but upon finding him, it was revealed Valance had suffered severe injuries which would later require most of his body to be repaired with advanced cybernetics. He was discharged from Imperial service because of his injuries and later became a famous bounty hunter. Valance has been a mixed-reviewed addition to the Star Wars canon since his first appearance, but he has both worked with and against Boba Fett in multiple stories throughout the comics, and if he is able to make it out of the Bounty Hunters comic alive, I would love to see him cross paths with Boba again. He's also a character whose design and weaponry would look sick in live action, so I'd love to see him appear in at least one episode. Number 4, Omega and the Bad Batch. As I mentioned earlier, the Book of Boba Fett's longevity continues to be a question as we move closer and closer to its December 29th release date. While Disney has been relatively non-committal on the future of almost every show they've announced from Star Wars and Marvel, the words event series seem to be key to understanding whether a series is planned to run for more than one season. Disney has opted to use the term event series instead of the traditional limited series when describing shows that seem to be only one season, so shows like WandaVision and Falcon and the Winter Soldier were both given the event series label before they were released, and next year's Obi-Wan Kenobi has also been labeled as such. Loki was the curveball, with Season 2 only being confirmed during the credits of the last episode. Considering the Book of Boba Fett has not been labeled an event series, I think it's reasonable to assume there will most likely be a Season 2. With all of that said, I think Omega and what's left of the Bad Batch should make an appearance in the show at some point. Not only would it be a great corporate synergy move to continue to connect concurrently airing animated and live-action Star Wars shows, but it just makes too much sense for these characters. As I said in my list about the top 10 characters that should be in the Bad Batch Season 2, Boba and Omega have to meet and clearly define their relationship. Boba has lived his entire life dealing with living up to his father's legendary image, and I want to see what it would do to him if he finds out that he isn't the only heir to the Fett legacy. The main reason Omega and the Bad Batch are only number 4, however, is that I think most of this conflict will be played out in the Bad Batch, hopefully in Season 2. But if the Bad Batch Season 2 comes out next year and Boba does have a significant presence in it, I'd love to see a possible Book of Boba Fett Season 2 reciprocate by expanding on their relationship as adults. On top of all that, can you just imagine Tamara Morrison playing 6 characters with vastly different personalities but the same face all at once in the same scene? I'd love to see that. Number 3. Aphra and her series regulars. Could we finally get Aphra in live action? Well, with the Book of Boba Fett being the first Mandalorian-era show that will seemingly tackle the underworld head-on, I think this is the best chance we've had yet at seeing infamous galactic archaeologists. Based on what we've seen from the Book of Boba Fett so far, Aphra herself is most likely a character that wouldn't appear until later in the season or in possibly a Season 2, depending on the direction the show is going. However, I think Aphra's series regulars like Black Chrysanthemum and Sana Starros have a strong chance of appearing in the show this season, hopefully to pave the way for Aphra's eventual appearance. I'd also love to see 000 and BT if Aphra were to make an appearance, but that might just be asking too much. Number 2. Qi'ra and Crimson Dawn. We don't yet know how Charles Soule is going to wrap up Crimson Dawn's involvement in the main events of the Star Wars galaxy during the 1-year gap between The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, in the upcoming Crimson Reign and Hidden Empire comic series. And even though I've constantly been an advocate for more important and universe-impactful stories in canon comics and novels, I'd be very surprised if they decided to kill Qi'ra in a comic, especially when Emilia Clarke has already played her in a film. Qi'ra and Crimson Dawn have not only become one of the most interesting aspects of the Star Wars underworld in the last year with War of the Bounty Hunters, but in my opinion, Qi'ra was the most interesting part of Solo: A Star Wars Story altogether. War of the Bounty Hunters has only amplified my interest in what happens to her. There are 2 ways of looking at Kira's possible future in the Book of Boba Fett. First would be that she most likely won't be in the show because Crimson Reign will only be in its first issue of 5 by the time the first episode of the show airs. The other way of looking at it is that if Qi'ra were to pop up at the end of the Book of Boba Fett or in a post-credit scene as a tease for a possible Season 2, while Crimson Reign was wrapping up leading to Hidden Empire, it could draw the eyes of more casual fans over to the comics as they await what comes next in the Book of Boba Fett. Either way, I think the character makes more sense than ever to appear in this series after reading The War of the Bounty Hunters, and I just desperately want to finally see some finality for Emilia Clarke and this character in Star Wars. Number 1. Can you guess it? I feel like it's fairly obvious. It was honestly the easiest character of all of these on the entire list to place for me. If you haven't guessed it, then I guess you don't think as highly of Cad Bane as I do. After we finally got his return during the middle of the Bad Batch Season 1 this year, my excitement level for a possible live-action appearance by the ruthless Duros bounty hunter is at an all-time high. But it's not just my love for the character that has him at number 1 on my list, it's also because above all the other characters on this list, Cad Bane just makes sense. The Book of Boba Fett trailer showed us a Boba Fett in transition. He even goes as far to declare he's not a bounty hunter. There are many beings in the galaxy that might take issue with Boba's attempt to transcend beyond the grime of his past life into a more Mafia Don-style unifier of the crime world. I think amongst those most aggressive of these Boba detractors would be Cad Bane, Jango's former rival and Boba's former mentor, whom Boba shot and left for dead. I would love for this show to turn into a mix of Star Wars versions of The Godfather with an all-out war for criminal supremacy now that Jabba is dead, and Red Dead Redemption where we have a former outlaw student going after his former outlaw master. I need old man Cad Bane walking into Tatooine with spurs on his boots jangling, a man with no name style poncho over his shoulders, and the straw in his mouth as he guns down anyone who has to do with the Fett name. It would be so epic, and it would add a true villain to the series' overarching narrative. If I had to sacrifice all of the other characters on my list just to get one episode with Cad Bane in the Book of Boba Fett, I would do it with zero hesitation. That's how much I think this character can bring to the series and give Boba the perfect way to symbolically conclude his bounty hunter past. Thank you all so much for watching this video. If you didn't at the beginning, please like the video, subscribe to Star Wars Lads for Star Wars content 3 days a week, and comment below and let me know which characters you'd like to see in the Book of Boba Fett. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all on Wednesday for comic reviews.